The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome to the American Indian and Alaska Native Behavioral Health webinar series presented by the National American Indian and Alaska Native Addiction Technology Transfer Center. I'm Karen Summers and I'll be administering today's webinar. Today, Dan Dickerson will be presenting on the utilization of traditional base practices for American Indians and Alaska Natives with substance use disorders, research and treatment implications. This training series is brought to you by the National American Indian and Alaska Native Addiction Technology Transfer Center, or ATTC. The National American Indian and Alaska Native ATTC is one of 4 national focus centers which serves the ATTC network. The ATTC network is a nationwide network made up of 10 regional centers, 4 national focus centers, and a network coordinating office. The map on this slide shows the states served by each of the regional ATTCs. To learn more about our center or the network or your regional center, please visit our website. Our next webinar in this series is scheduled for Wednesday, July 5th, where members of the White Earth Nation Harm Reduction Coalition will be presenting Harm Reduction Coalition Development, How Tribes Can Develop Their Own Coalitions in Their Communities. In addition to this webinar series, we offer another series titled the Essential Substance Abuse Skills Webinar Series, which provides an overview of competencies from CSAT's TAP 21 publication, Addiction Counseling Competencies. The next session in our Essential Substance Abuse Skills series will be held on June 19th from 1 to 2:30 Eastern Time, where Dee LeBeau-Hein will present on referral, service coordination, and documentation. For more information on our webinar series, you can contact me at the email address or phone number provided on this slide. Our center is a NADAC certified educational provider, and we'll be happy to provide you with CEUs. The cost is $10 to do so. The CEU request form, along with a copy of the PowerPoint, will be sent to you within 24 hours of today's session. If you don't receive an email with the handouts within 2 business days, please let us know. In addition to the PowerPoint handout and CEU request form, a consent form and information about participation in our GIPRA evaluation will be attached to the email you receive following today's webinar. We ask that you fill out the consent form and return it by either email or fax. If you agree to complete our evaluation, you will receive a link inviting you to participate in a brief online customer survey. This survey asks about your satisfaction with the event and will take less than 10 minutes to complete. GIPRA stands for the Government Performance and Results Act, and SAMHSA asks us to evaluate our events in order to comply with this act and provide improved performance assessment and accountability. SAMHSA uses information collected by these surveys to determine how many people have attended our events, your satisfaction with our events, and how useful our events are to you. We hope you'll assist us in gathering this information about our services by participating in our evaluation. Before we start today's session, I'd like to give you a quick overview of the GoToWebinar system. To hide or expand your toolbar at any time, you can click the red arrow in the top right of your window. To expand your screen, click the middle button in the top right-hand corner. You will be muted for the duration of this webinar. Please use the question chat box to share your questions and comments. Your questions will only be visible to me, the webinar moderator, and I'll pass your questions along to the presenter throughout the presentation. We would also like you to be aware that this webinar records participant attention time. If you minimize the webinar or are working in another window, the system will record your participation as inactive, which may be reflected in the number of CEUs received. The opinions expressed in this presentation are those of the presenter and do not necessarily reflect the official position of CSAT, SAMHSA, or the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Today's speaker is Dan Dickerson. Dan is a board-certified psychiatrist and addiction psychiatrist. He is an assistant research psychiatrist at UCLA Integrated Substance Abuse Programs, and he also provides psychiatric and substance abuse treatment services at the United American Indian Involvement in Los Angeles. His research interests include development of culturally relevant substance abuse treatments for American Indians and Alaska Natives, and he is the principal investigator on an R21 NIH-funded research grant which focuses on the development and initial evaluation of drum-assisted recovery therapy for Native Americans. Dr. Dickerson's study is the first NIH research study on the potential benefits of drumming for American Indians and Alaska Natives with substance use disorders. Please join me in welcoming Dan Dickerson.
Yeah, thank you very much for the nice introduction. It's an honor to have this opportunity. It's an honor to present on a very important topic that is very relevant to American Indians and Alaska Natives throughout the United States, and that's on utilizing traditional-based practices, and it's both treatment and research implications. It looks like I'm trying to forward my screen here. Okay. Just 1 minute here. Okay, sorry about that. So for today's agenda, I'll be providing a brief overview on traditional-based practices and its utilization throughout clinics in the United States, the potential value of utilizing research for American Indians, Alaska Natives, on traditional-based practices, and then an overview of my study, drum-assisted recovery therapy for Native Americans, and then some of the issues as it relates to barriers, as it relates to providing these treatments within the clinical setting and in conducting research on these practices and how we could strategize to both provide and do research on these treatments. Throughout this presentation, feel free to send in questions. I'll do my best to answer questions as we go along. And also, if we have time, answer as many questions as I can at the very end. So just to provide a little background, American Indians and Alaska Natives have significant rates of both alcohol and drug abuse, illicit drug abuse. For instance, past month binge alcohol use and illicit drug use are higher among Native Americans than the general U.S. averages, 30% to 24% for binge alcohol use, and higher rates for illicit drug use. And also based on data from roughly the past decade, American Indians, Alaska Natives were more likely to require or need substance abuse treatment services than other ethnic racial groups in the U.S. In addition, Native Americans experience high rates of various mental health issues and disorders and mental health events, including traumatic exposure, high traumatic exposure rates, abuse, depression, post-traumatic stress, very high suicide rates, especially among teenagers and young adults, and we commonly see comorbidity of mental health issues with substance abuse. So we haven't seen these trends change over the past several decades. So what appears to be needed is more culturally relevant treatments to be made available to Native Americans with substance abuse problems. It's been theorized that historical-based actions, historical trauma, have had significant effects on Native Americans. And these events include forced removals from native lands, relocation acts from the reservation setting to urban centers, boarding schools, and many other political, economic, social injustices experienced over the past 500 years in the United States. And this may have contributed to a loss of cultural identity, which many believe who work in this field is contributing to persistent drug and alcohol problems. So we've also noticed among community leaders and substance abuse leaders that providing cultural-based activities and education with regards to cultural-based activities can help decrease these trends. And we've seen this in many different studies and reports that if we're able to provide these services within the clinical-based setting, that our patients and clients can learn and be educated on some of the traditional ways which have been lost throughout the past several years. So we've noticed that individuals who participated in traditional-based activities and anecdotally have shown renewed pride in their heritage, have had successful treatment outcomes, and have learned new and healthier cultural ideals and views and traditions which may aid in their recovery. So if we look at traditional-based activities, we notice that there's interest in our patients and clients in, first of all, learning more about traditional-based activities and their own tribal cultures, but also to have an opportunity to participate in healthy activities that could help them with their substance abuse recovery. And a big component of participating in traditional-based activities and services and healers is the spiritual aspects and the spiritual dimension of these services. So that when, and this is also very important in substance abuse recovery, where we often see an emphasis on the spiritual, and when patients are engaged in a spiritual path, their recovery path is stronger and their treatment outcomes are better. So it only makes sense that with Native Americans that if you were to, first of all, provide traditional-based activities, that our patients would, first of all, gain health and be educated on healthier ideals, gain that cultural connection, and also have enhanced spirituality, is what we would believe. And these activities could range, and this is just a short list of examples seen throughout the continental United States and Alaska: sweat lodge, smudging, social dances, vision quests, drumming, hunting, storytelling, attending powwows, making regalia, making drums, jewelry, bead making, cooking and eating traditional foods, making cradle boards, and learning the stories behind these activities and ceremonies, and understanding the significance with these activities throughout our Native history. So some of the more, and today I'm going to just provide a fairly quick overview on some traditional-based treatments that are existing pretty commonly throughout substance abuse treatment centers serving Native Americans. And I just chose Sweat Lodge, Talking Circle, and White Bison, the medicine wheel, and 12 steps, which is used throughout the U.S. And if we look at Sweat Lodge ceremonies, we see that the Sweat Lodge is commonly used throughout the continental U.S. We really don't see the Sweat Lodge being used in Alaska, for instance, but for the continental United States, it's very commonly used. It's used as a link for many Native Americans in substance abuse treatment centers, where, from what I've seen, many treatment centers serving Native Americans have opportunities for Native Americans to go to a Sweat Lodge as part of the treatment. But in the formal integration of Sweat Lodge ceremony into the clinical setting and having progress notes made, etc., billing for it, not as commonly seen. This could be a discussion in and of itself, a long discussion on how culturally appropriate would it be to integrate the Sweat Lodge sacred ceremony into the clinical setting. What concerns would there be on doing that? What concerns would there be on doing a research study on the Sweat Lodge? Because throughout U.S. history, many Native Americans believe that a lot of the cultural traditions have been diluted, have been misperceived, and a lot has been taken away from Native American communities. And do we want to give away traditional-based knowledge as well, so to speak? So there are concerns in general over research, appropriate research being done on sweat lodge and other traditional-based practices. I have a question here: why post-traumatic stress? What are the causes? First of all, many believe that there could be historically based post-traumatic stress from the various historical actions that have been experienced by Native Americans, but also with Native Americans, there's a lot of traumatic exposure in general. We did a study in Los Angeles where, among myself and Carrie Johnson, and we found that among youth who are receiving mental health services, that witnessing domestic violence, living in a home with individuals with significant legal histories and sexual abuse were very commonly seen among patients receiving mental health services. So there is a lot of, unfortunately, trauma exposure, and that also includes accidents, homicides, and suicides. So thank you for that question. We'll go next to the talking circle. This is another very commonly used traditional activity that is used throughout clinics serving Native Americans in the United States. And it's a traditional-based activity. It's a non-competitive, circular form of having a discussion, providing all individuals with equal time and respect, often used with sage and other items. People are allowed that opportunity to share their feelings and experiences in a safe environment. We see that the talking circle is well-liked by our clients and patients, provides them with an opportunity to share their stresses and hopes and struggles with addiction. But research is very limited as well with the talking circle, as well as with the sweat lodge, and probably for many of the same reasons. First of all, how would you do research on a traditional-based Native ceremony with Western-based models of research? In a sense, investigating a spiritual, sacred activity into a linear, Westernized, black and white, yes or no, does it work, does it not work, format. So that is one of the potential barriers, and also the cultural appropriateness of doing research. I did a quick search on PubMed, and there have been a couple of studies I'm aware of, one with diabetes education using the talking circle by Roxanne Struthers and colleagues. It showed benefit, that the talking circle was a technique effective in providing education on type 2 diabetes. Also, a study by Felicia Hodge at UCLA. She did a study on talking circles and cervical cancer screening and prevention, and she found that the talking circle was an appropriate way of providing health-related information to being accepted and being presented in a sensitive manner. And with regards to the sweat lodge, there was a study done by the Diné Center for Substance Abuse Treatment utilizing sweat lodge ceremony as a modality for jail-based treatment, published in the Journal of Psychoactive Drugs in 2003, and they found some limited statistical significance in some drinking in some measures, but they found various improvements with drinking, especially in the number of drinks at a time that an individual reports after participating in the sweat lodge ceremony. So there are some research in talking circles and sweat lodge, but it is limited, and how researchers and communities would do that definitely requires a lot more conversation. So the Medicine Wheel and 12 Steps is a widely used program developed by Don Cahoyas and White Bison Incorporation, utilizing the fundamental principles of the 12 Steps, but providing it in a culturally appropriate manner, adding the traditions, the Medicine Wheel concepts into the 12 Steps, so that you get a cultural-based education and approach to recovery. And for whatever odd reason, we don't see a lot of formal, at least from what I've seen, formal integration of this program into the structure of a substance abuse treatment facility, where you bill for it, you note the program in notes, etc. And the research on the Medicine Wheel and 12 Steps is limited, but it's very popular. Patients love this program, both patients who know their own culture and who do not. It's very, very widely used throughout urban and reservation and Alaska settings, and it's very culturally appropriate, but the research on it is minimal. So looking at some of the potential value of some of the potential value of doing research with traditional-based practices. With traditional-based practices, there is a very limited number, as we just discussed, of studies showing its validity. The communities report that this works, that traditional-based activities work for the community, work for themselves, that they could be good for health and substance abuse treatments. So the value of doing research would be to add validity, so to speak, to what is known in Native villages, make it valid on a so-called scientific level, add to the literature with regard to the benefits, and ultimately provide American Indians with more culturally relevant and acceptable treatments that may work better than what's currently available to decrease the trends of substance abuse among Native Americans, and to help provide more treatment options with Native Americans. There's a question here. I'll go to a question. What are the benefits of utilizing talking circle formats versus a more conventional format where people are talking with one another? The talking circle is really a lot more culturally acceptable and comfortable based on my experience and with what we do at United American Indian Involvement. Talking circles, the clients tend to feel more comfortable. They have that cultural component. They have sage, eagle feathers. They have teaching by a cultural leader who heads the group, and it provides also an education on communication, the style of communication with Native Americans. So there are quite a bit of more benefits with the talking circle formats, although general group counseling is beneficial and can be good for Native Americans. I think the talking circle is just a better format. Okay, I'm going to try to my screen is stuck here. You could bear with me. Okay, sorry about that. Now we're going to get to my my study, which is an ARC-21 grant funded through the National Institutes of Health, National Center for Complementary and Alternative Medicine, Drum-Assisted Recovery Therapy for Native Americans. I'm going to provide a little overview on what we've done and a couple of short videos as well. So many of the questions that I've been talking about come into play on this study relating to drumming. Drumming is another sacred traditional based activity with American Indians, Alaska Natives, and indigenous people all around the world. Then how can we use this in a culturally appropriate manner for substance abuse treatment? How important culturally is it to accompany singing? These are just some questions that kind of come out pretty quickly with drumming and treatment. Should you accompany drumming with singing? What are the roles of males and females? And how do you approach the diversity with many different drumming traditions among the over 562 federally recognized tribes? So we know drumming's been used by Native Americans all across the United States. Here's a historical cave painting from Arkansas showing what appears to be a traditional leader with a long shaft and what appears to be a drum leading a procession of a community, of a Native community, which suggests the drum as having a spiritual leading effect, a community effect, and being a very important part of helping to lead and symbolize and assist with the community and being a very important component of the community. So with American Indians and Alaska Natives, the drum is a sacred instrument symbolizing the heartbeat of Mother Earth to many Native tribes, used in sacred ceremonies, social ceremonies, in preparation for hunting ceremonies, individually for individual healing, used in powwows. It's still used by medicine leaders to heal the sick, carrying songs and prayers and stories and traditions. It symbolizes a lot for Native Americans. It's a way of bringing people together, bringing one out of their shell, so to speak, engaging in a culturally based activity. So there's many positives with drumming and a lot of historical and sacred significance with drumming. And offer connection with the spiritual life of an individual, with your ancestors, identity, and it's used throughout in many activities, as I've mentioned. And there's also a lot of rules or so-called protocols on how you make drums, prepare drumming, do drumming, recognition of the purpose of drumming, and the educational component of drumming is very, very important, as with any other traditional bass activity. So, yeah, just to provide a quote by an unknown person, anonymous person, the drum connected me with something I hadn't known before, and I felt a huge lump in my throat that was equal parts sorrow, gratitude, and joy. When I was coaxed out of my first inter-tribal dance, I closed my eyes and I felt the drum and began to move my feet. It was magic. I could dance. When it would be a few years before I was graced with the drum teachings of the people, but there was a spiritual connection nonetheless. Once I felt the drum in my chest, the hollowness I carried as a displaced Indian kid was gone, in its place belonging. Bear with me while I try to move the slide here. And if we look also on drumming in terms of its scientific, so-called science, drumming in research so far has demonstrated physical and psychological effects with Winkleman in 2003. It may help with generating healthy brainwave activity. For instance, If I go to the next slide here, we see alpha and theta wave activity being enhanced, and the brain is operating at different modes throughout the 24-hour day that we live. Sometimes it's on alert status, sometimes it's sleeping. But what drumming has shown is that the alpha and theta wave activities are enhanced, and that has to do with more relaxation and meditation. So that then suggests that there's healthy effects with drumming, that drumming can help with possibly anxiety, depression, and help to stabilize mood potentially. And also some studies have shown that there's enhanced connection between the frontal, if we look at this last point on the bottom, the frontal lobe and the limbic system, so that connection between how we think and how we feel are stronger, and that with recovery that could be a significant benefit, since that helps to provide insight and enhance insight into our actions and our feelings. So going forward, okay, I think, so looking at the DARTNA treatment program, myself and Anthony Robichaud, who's a great substance abuse counselor in California, we started talking about how can we use drumming in a treatment and a program, and he really helped me in just generate a lot of excitement and thoughts on how we could approach drumming as a substance abuse treatment for Native Americans, and we subsequently received an R21 pilot study through NCAM in 2010. And just to go over the treatment protocol, it's 3 days a week, initially, but now we have it at 2 days a week, so it's 2 days a week for 12 weeks, each day consisting of a 3-hour treatment format, and each of the 12 weeks focusing on one step of A or NA. And looking at the 3-hour session, we have the first hour on education, cultural education, drumming, teaching of songs, medicine wheel, white bison concepts. Then an hour and a half, we've initially had this at 60 minutes, but during our pre-test and focus groups, people felt that having more drumming would be beneficial. So we have 90 minutes of drumming, and then a half-hour talking circle at the end. And we start, and there are various different medicine wheels that exist, but we've used this approach, which is very similar to white bison. We received Don Cohoya's approval and encouragement, and we use his format, but we have slightly different dimensions, starting with the spiritual in weeks 1 through 3 on the right-hand side of your screen, going down to weeks 4 through 6, physical. Then we're going to be changing that to emotional on the west side, and mental weeks 10 through 12. So each component of the treatment, we focus on these specific areas of the medicine wheel, and the medicine wheel is one of the most commonly used models or diagrams of wellness for Native Americans. And even though not all tribes have historically used medicine wheels, we find that this is a pretty good universal symbol for the U.S. So this research focused on focus groups to bring this to providers, community advisory board, and patients, and then to enhance the program and to provide it to 10 American Indians, Alaska Natives for their feedback on what they think of it, and then follow up focus groups to finalize the protocol, and manual development. Right now we're at manual development at the very end of this grant program. So we had initially focus groups with substance abuse providers, American Indians with histories of substance abuse, and our community advisory board to obtain feedback on this approach. And using Atlas TI as a qualitative program. The focus group themes were: 1, drumming can be beneficial for American Indians with substance abuse issues, but you need to assure a culturally-based focus and a treatment format that provides for a foundation of cultural ideals across a broad landscape of diverse tribes, and addressing gender roles must be adequately addressed. And just a couple of quotes from these focus groups. From one CAB member said, "You want to teach definitely the significance of drumming, and Native people feel that drumming is sacred. It's the heartbeat of the earth and Mother Earth. The target is also educating and having hands-on experience to have your own creativity to you making the drum, and on top of that, teaching how to create the drum." And I forgot to mention also in the first session of the Dartmouth program, we have participants make a drum to provide for a learning experience. And another CAB quote: "So we know there's a relationship with someone's cultural identity and their substance use or other behavioral problems. So there's already that relationship. So being more connected to the culture is really going to help them, whether they've drummed before or whether they've ever had any knowledge about their tribal culture. I think it's their first step that will really help." From another CAB individual: "The tools they use in treatment should be implemented in their lives. It's up to them to continue to go to powwow or to sweat or to cultivate it in their lives. For drumming to be a part of their lives will be the responsibility of the service providers to create opportunities for the clients after their participation in treatment." So we found and learned more that in 12 weeks you're not going to learn everything. By no means. This is basically an introduction to various concepts in drumming, and that just like an exercise program of 12 weeks or any spiritual church program, you're not going to just stop at 12 weeks. You're going to keep going with healthy activities, exercise during your lifetime, and participate in your spiritual path, and cultural identity, and drumming being another example of that. So we have found that providing participants with the linkages afterwards is very important. So then we had 10 people try this out, ranging from 19 to 67, 6 males, 5 females initially. Then we had 5 and 5. And the we had some, first of all, out of 10 people who fully participated, 5 completed the 12 weeks and 8 completed at 6 weeks. And even though we had very small number, we used various assessments to analyze their physical, psychological well-being, cultural identity, and spirituality scales, and some other scales. And what we found, even with this small sample size, is statistical significant improvement with the Addictions Severity Index, ASI Medical Composite Score, below 0.05%. ASI Psychological Score at 6 weeks, and close to statistical significance at 12 weeks. Spirituality was enhanced, statistically significant as well. And also what was statistically significant, we found improvement, was physical and functioning well-being. So even with, currently this study is submitted for publication, and there are some exciting and promising results. We can't hang our hats on this due to the very small sample size, but the promising results we found were pretty noteworthy. And I have a couple of short videos I'd like to show real quick. So if you have audio, maybe you could hear this. This is the drum making activity in our pilot. So here's everyone participating. If I could get this going. Okay. Of making their drum. And in LA, our community advisory board and through our focus groups recommended a powwow style drum. Since the powwow style of drumming was the most commonly used style of drumming in LA, we have to emphasize that it would be very different. It could be very different, at least in different communities in the U.S. So whatever your community uses as a tradition, that's what we would encourage or suggest. So this was just an example of making the powwow style drum in Los Angeles. And I'll try, I may not be able to go to my other slide, it looks like. But that was, the other slide I had was in showing some drumming activity of individuals drumming. And I really apologize, I won't be able to show that. But then afterwards, excuse me while I go through the slides, after they made their own drum, it dried and people learned the process of drumming and making a powwow drum. Then they used the drum in their treatment. And just some quotes from participants. I'm grateful it's time, one participant said, I'm grateful it's my time to reconnect with the cultural, traditional way of life and to find out who I really am and where I came from. Another participant said, with constant distraction in my path, drumming is a good way to look up from stress, take care of things, and get them out of my way. I have an email here, a question. Are there any tribal colleges that currently offer classes to teach Native students about cultural practices and how to incorporate within evidence-based practices? I'm not sure, to be honest. I know Bonnie Duran at University of Washington is doing a lot of studies with tribal colleges, and I'm aware, and I apologize, I forget this individual's name, but there is someone I have communicated with recently who's doing a program on his own, a really rich program on drumming and wabriety. But to my knowledge, I don't know of like a broad-based drumming program or traditional practice program throughout the tribal colleges. But Bonnie Duran would definitely know that if you'd like to communicate with her at University of Washington. Thanks for the question. And as we get towards the end of the presentation, there's a few more quotes I have from a participant who participated in Dartnett. One person said, I feel serenity and peace. It's uplifting, and the drum itself is spiritual. I never thought of doing drugs or drinking. I start to feel spiritual connection. This is where I need to be, where I should be. I feel at home. Yeah, and someone asked me just now about what evaluation tools I use, and if you like, you could email me, and I could give you the list of what we used. We used ASI. We used some actually cancer screening tools, but it wasn't directly measuring cancer, but on fatigue, physical, and psycho and functioning well-being. We thought they were just good, clear questions on those areas. And I'll be more than welcome to email you those scales which we've used. Okay. Now, I think we have about 10, 15 minutes or so, and just to review some of the barriers to conducting research and providing services of traditional-based services in the clinical setting. There is some bad experience in the past that Native Americans have experienced with research. So there's a huge stigma, huge concerns of being experimented on. There's been unethical research on Native Americans in the past. That's one consideration. But that being said, there's too little research on Native Americans, very limited information of Native Americans in general, both in urban and reservation-based settings, the characteristics and treatment and prevention studies. This also, another reason for that is due to the shortage of I just put down here research shops or established research centers for Native Americans. Sparrow Manson has a very well-established research center at University of Colorado. Karina Walters, Bonnie Duran at University of Washington. Kamala Venner, Phil May, University of New Mexico. I'm doing a few studies at UCLA, and there's many others, but there's very few in general. So, and another point I like to make is that Native Americans really don't participate, or there's not enough numbers or reports of Native Americans in regular clinical trials and just your everyday clinical trial. So there needs to be more encouragement to participate in clinical trials because there is under a shortage of research data with Native Americans, which then from research you get the data and the information to validate needs for programs and treatments, etc. So also, but with traditional-based activities, we also have the sacred nature of traditional-based activities. So, like I mentioned earlier, there would be concerns of advertising, so-called advertising of Native ceremonies to the scientific community when much has already been taken away, diluting or exploiting traditional-based activities. So with this, we really need to have a community-based participatory research approach, starting slow and purposeful with qualitative research to kind of get the community perspective and community-led approach. We also have to provide more education in the communities that research is needed, and it's a good thing if it's done correctly with community engagement. And researchers need to fully be aware that if they're going to have interest in tradition-based practices, that the sacred nature be fully appreciated. In some research activities, communities may not just want research, so we need to be very aware of what forms of research researchers do, and we need to have further discussions with NIH to discuss challenging scenarios. Native Americans make up like 1.5% of the population, but in research you need numbers, you need large number of participants to show statistical significance. So there may be a need for allowing for smaller sample sizes and different innovative ways of doing research, and research for and grants for research capacity building. There needs to be more of that. Okay, so and also many have stated that they'd like for some of the practices being done in Native communities to be considered beneficial within the scientific community. Even though there's no research, there should be recognition. Some community leaders believe that these practices are beneficial. So we need to educate also NIH research reviewers who look over these grants, and also more publications, special issue medical journals on traditional-based practices that specifically look at these treatments. So that's the end of my presentation here. I wanted to make sure I had time for any questions. My apologies for going through that very quickly, but I just wanted to make sure I went over some important areas that have to do with traditional healing and providing these services in the community. I wanted to mention here in Los Angeles, Carrie Johnson at United American Indian Involvement, and with some of my assistants, we received an innovations grant to integrate traditional-based healing within the system of care we have in Los Angeles for urban natives, integrating physical, emotional, physical, emotional, and substance abuse treatment with traditional healing among various clinics. So we just received this grant a year ago. It's been going very well. It's people really liking it. We're getting a lot of participants joining the program. So from what we've seen among providers and researchers is that the clients are really voicing more and more interest and suggestions for integrating traditional-based practices. So I hope that more discussion can be made on this topic. And with the Native American ATTC, this is one of our big priority areas as well. And what's great about the Native American ATTC is that it's comprised of many of the top leaders in the U.S. on substance abuse issues throughout, from coast to coast. So we're hopeful that we could continue having discussion in this organization, but there definitely needs to be more communication on community-based level as well. I have another question here. Do you think drumming would have positive effect on non-Native participants? The answer would be yes. There is an individual by the name of Barry Bittman, B-I-T-T-M-A-N, and he has a big drumming program for the general U.S. population. That's very popular, and he does a lot of research showing its effects. So drumming is used throughout the world. Many indigenous communities all around the world, from Africa, South America, Japan, Australia, United States, Alaska, but also the general U.S. And probably the general U.S. does more drumming within the clinical setting than natives, just because of the maybe a little more easier, not really having to sift through all the sacred components, so to speak. So there are clinics out there that actually provide drumming for the general population, and but this Dartna approach is specifically for Native Americans, but there are many drumming programs that are beneficial for a lot of different populations. One of the hot issues, and here's another question, is you noted there may be gender issues in practice of drumming. How were those resolved? So this is a very big question that's generated a lot of discussion on this project. Because historically, in general, men usually drum in drumming activities, and women accompany the men with singing and dancing traditionally. But we often get, and there's various points I'll just discuss in a couple minutes. There are a lot of females who come in wanting to drum, but often they're not aware of their own tribal traditions or have an understanding that women usually don't drum in their tribal tradition. But there are many tribes where women do drum. There's many drumming groups, the Man Killers in Northern California, and many others where women drum. So this is really community specific. In our project, we didn't put so-called rules on men drumming, women not drumming. We kind of let it evolve, and the women in our group just decided not to drum and not to participate in drum making. So the women in our group said to us that this is not part of their culture to be drummers. They sang, they danced, they accompanied the men. So when we had the drum making activity, the women chose to kind of be there and support and be a little bit in the background. But what everyone was saying on this drum making day was that there was a very positive feel in the room. There's a good feeling, a healthy feeling, traditional-based feeling, and among the women participants who were in our project, they chose not to drum, but they sat behind the men singing, and that's what they wanted to do. That's what they were comfortable in doing. But this could be, there are a lot of people out there. I've spoken with a lot of women who really feel strongly about women drumming. But then I've also heard a lot of traditional people saying they're very strongly that women should be taught that that's not the tradition, that's not the way. And if you allow women to drum, we may be, like one person in another focus group said, it's like having a strong cup of coffee. if you start watering it down too much, you no longer have that strong, good cup of coffee. So I'm not, I'm not saying yes, no to women drumming. All I'm saying is that what I would suggest is that the community, the elders, have discussions on drumming education if you use this program, and that you use your own tribal traditions, and if there is need for changing, that this is done, on the community and elder-based level. But in general, we find that men usually do the drumming and women accompany the men. But that is definitely a hot issue, especially in today's changing society with a lot of women leaders and a lot of different roles of men and women in general. So I think that wraps up today's webinar. I'd like to thank you for attending. My email is on the screen if you wish to send any questions. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan. I think we do have a few more minutes for a few additional questions, if that's okay.
Okay.
So can switch back. So could you speak to if there's any thoughts on using this with Alaska Native youth as an early intervention?
Yes. Yeah, I'm a Nupiaq myself from northern Alaska, Wainwright, near Point Barrow. But I have to mention I grew up in sunny Southern California. My mom grew up in Wainwright. So I go up there quite often and am on my own cultural learning journey. But this definitely, I presented on this presentation in Anchorage and with some other groups in the Anchorage area, and there's definitely a lot of excitement on using drumming for both adults and youth. So this could also be prevention for youth to have an opportunity to make a drum, learn about drumming, and learn their own tribal ways. So this could definitely be used for Alaska Native youth.
Great, thank you. And then if you could also address, sorry, let me pull this up. If you have any examples of incorporating traditional practices into treatment planning?
Yes, there are some examples in the Navajo Nation, to my knowledge, where they have, I don't know specifically the areas, where there is a traditional ceremonies and cultural identity questionnaire that's provided to clients when they first come into treatment to get an understanding. That's what we recommend anyways throughout Native American clinics, is to have and to discuss your cultural background and the level at which you identify with your culture. But yeah, there's some clinics in the Navajo Nation that do provide that with the integration of traditional activities. And we're working on that as well in LA. And the South Central Foundation in Anchorage has an amazing program on traditional healing, where they have healers, a great clinic for Alaska Natives in Anchorage, where people are able to get healing from traditional healers.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I think that does wrap up our amount of time for today. So once again, I'd like to thank Dan Dickerson for sharing his knowledge with us today. I'd like to remind everyone to please watch for our email with handouts for this webinar. The attachments will include the CEU request form, the PowerPoint handout, and the GPRA consent form. We appreciate your decision to participate in our GPRA evaluation, as completion of these forms allows us to show SAMHSA the number of people who are served by our webinar. To participate in the GIPRA evaluation, return a signed consent form to our center by either email or fax. And we hope that you'll be able to join us for the next webinar in this series. On July 19th, members of the White Earth Nation Harm Reduction Coalition will be presenting on Harm Reduction Coalition Development, how tribes can develop their own coalitions in their communities. We also hope that you'll be able to join us for our next webinar in our Essential Substance Abuse Skills webinar series on June 19th, where Dee LeBeau-Hein will be presenting on referral, service coordination, and documentation. Thank you, everyone, for your time participating in today's session and your wonderful questions. We hope that you've enjoyed the session, and we look forward to hearing your feedback. Thank you, and have a good day.